In the Vold Kingdom, a man could be seen descending from the sky, unconscious. A voice rang in his head, telling him to wake up. Once he did, he opened his arms and shouted, "Flying squirrel," but he was soon confused when he couldn't find his wingsuit. He looked down at his belly and noticed he was also fat. The voice inside his head shouted, "Flying squirrel," before correcting itself and telling him to activate magic quickly. Seeing him continue to exclaim in confusion, the voice asked what he was doing. He shouted words like, "Fly," "Activate the flying magic," "Flying brooms," and "Magic carpet," but nothing happened. The voice asked what he was talking about and told him to say "Float" quickly. The falling man immediately shouted "Float" and was happy it finally activated, but he was still not stopping. He cried, shouting "Stop and float." He called out to the goddess, saying she's got to be kidding him, and asked how he was supposed to defeat the evil god in this condition. Several minutes ago, a child sat on a man's seat, playing with the paper that was folded to turn into a frog. Suddenly, an announcement was made, reminding them to ensure their seats and tray tables were in their original positions and that their seatbelts were securely fastened. He had just finished his work and was on his way back to Japan. As a reward for successfully negotiating a big contract, his boss booked him a business class flight. It was very comfortable. Traveling on business trips abroad can be pretty boring, but because the child who was sitting near him was very friendly, he made a happy memory. He told the girl they were about to land, so she should go back to her seat. The girl agreed and asked if she could see him again. The man patted her head, assuring her that she, of course, could. However, an explosion suddenly happened. He held the kid while looking at the old woman. A hole appeared to where she was originally standing. He was confused, and it felt like time had stopped. Suddenly, he heard a voice saying he was fit. He looked around, but no one was there. He could hear it clearly, so he wondered if he was hallucinating or perhaps inside a dream. The voice answered that he wasn't hallucinating, but was instead speaking directly into his mind. The voice told him to relax his body since it would feel less taxing if he talked with his thoughts. He asked if he was dead and if she was a god or King Enma. She noticed he was pretty calm and said he was right about her being a god, but he was not dead yet. He asked if what she meant by "yet" was that he'd die after this. He held the child, thinking he was probably going to die, and he hadn't heard of one meeting a god and being helped by them. She informed him that because of the explosion that happened just now, all the passengers would unfortunately die. Time is short, so she'll get straight to the point. She is a goddess who manages another world. Hearing that, the man sweated and had a bad feeling about it. The goddess continued, saying she already had permission from the god of this world to summon a hero. Hearing about the hero summoning, his suspicious levels have maxed out. This was definitely not going to be a good thing. The goddess flinched and explained she wanted him to come to her world and defeat the evil god sealed deep in the dungeon. She begged him and said she at least wanted him to reseal it. The man apologized and refused. The goddess informed him he was going to die, and he thought it was fine since he'd had a pretty good life. The goddess exclaimed she was in trouble and asked why since it was supposed to be to his liking. The man replied that he enjoyed stuff like reincarnation and ice sky, but he just liked the story. He didn't want it if he had to do the whole defeating the evil gods or something dangerous like that. He'd rather die like this than have to do something dangerous. The goddess told him not to say such things and begged him to defeat the evil god. She informed him that only one person could be saved among all the passengers on this plane. He wondered if she meant the child in his arms, and the goddess confirmed, saying it was indeed that child. He asked if she was asking him to accept her request to reincarnate in her world in exchange for the child's life, and the goddess retorted that she hadn't said anything like that. It's just that he could help her if he sacrificed his life. The man observed the child and wanted to save her life if possible. The goddess replied that she understood and would grant his wish. She asked him to wait for a moment before disappearing. After a while, she returned, informing him that she had spoken with the god of this world. He was kind of a greedy guy, so as soon as they were done talking, she most likely must do something. The man thanked her for listening to his selfish request, and the goddess explained that it was because if he rejected her, her world might not have much time. The man stated that since she already paid the price of saving the child's life, he'd accept her request to summon him to another world in exchange. The goddess informed him that his memory and soul would be reincarnated upon his death. The man was confused and wondered if it was reincarnation and not summoning. The man took out his phone. He had a list of things to do. First, he would take a video of the hole in the fuselage with his smartphone. Second, he would send the video he had just taken via messages to his sister, who was waiting at the airport. Third, he would call and tell her what he had to say. He dialed his sister's number, and his sister answered, assuring him she'd come to pick him up so he didn't need to worry. He asked her to record the call. He heard a beep, and his sister informed him it was now recording but asked what it was for. He immediately told her that the plane was going to crash, so all of his savings and insurance were going to be hers. He threatened his father that if he messed with his inheritance, his ghost would come after him. He apologized to his mom because she outlived him. And finally, he thanked his uncle for everything he's done for him. His sister frowned, saying it was too much, even for a joke. He ignored her remarks and informed her that he was going to save this one child, so he wanted his smartphone's location to be tracked. Since he wanted to save her, he wanted rescue to come as soon as possible. Finally, he was glad that he got to hear her voice before saying goodbye. Fourth, he had to take out his travel sewing kit and sew a thin bedsheet into his clothes. Fifth, he had to put 3 memory foam pillows between him and the kid and strap her tightly to him. He stood up and walked closer to the hole. A woman noticed and approached him, asking what he was doing and if he had gone mad out of fear. She told him not to involve the kid and to just go on his own. He turned to her and smiled before apologizing for ignoring her so far and telling her she'd done splendidly to the very end. The kid cried, exclaiming she was scared. The man comforted her, saying it was okay and she just had to trust him and keep her eyes closed. He was going to get him back to her mother safe and sound. He texted his sister to inform her that they were currently about 5 kilometers from the airport and put the phone in the child's life jacket. He jumped in the hole, screaming, "Flying squirrel." In the present, the man continuously chanted "float" while descending to the ground. He was slowing down, but he was going to crash. Suddenly, a dragon appeared to catch him. His eyes snapped open. He seemed to have lost consciousness. He cursed, complaining that he couldn't get up. He slowly got up and walked over to a nearby mirror. However, he fell to the floor, groaning about the searing pain in his head. The memories of this body were flowing into him. The door opened, and a guard called out to him. Upon seeing Luke trembling on the floor, he rushed to his side and asked if he was okay before ordering another guard to call a doctor and inform the king about it as well. His name is Luke, but he complained to the goddess that reincarnation of the soul and memory of an actual person seemed bothersome. His eyes jolted open when someone called out his name, asking how long he planned on sleeping. It seemed that he once again fell unconscious. The doctor helped him up, and Luke asked the bearded man before him if he was his father. His father hit his head, calling him a fool. Luke groaned in pain, thinking he was going to die. He tried to touch something in the air. It was a status plate. Then, he noticed cuffs on his wrists. They were magic sealing bracelets, a type of magic tool that prevented the wearer from using magic. It seems that he was reincarnated as the third prince of a great country, Luke, who is an infamous bad boy in this country. All the attention he got was for his bad behavior, and rumors were spread. The nickname that has spread throughout the country is the Orc Prince. He sighed. He couldn't help but sigh. Luke thought that the goddess was too cruel. The rumors of the person he reincarnated into were too much. It was hard living as Luke. He could no longer feel any of Luke's consciousness, so he must have died in that accident. The king asked him what he was amusing on, and if he was reflecting on his mistakes. He told Luke not to make such a big deal out of a little poke. Luke thought he was definitely dying before deciding to man up and apologize. Then, he asked why the magic sealing bracelet was on him, and the king said it was to prevent him from running away. Every time he misbehaved, he didn't think about it and just ran away. So, he made sure Luke wouldn't get away this time. Luke thought his father was right. He had so many memories of running away from home. Speaking of which, he wondered what happened to the dragon that caught him. So he asked his father about it. His father explained that the dragon was already dead by the time he got there. He protected him, an idiot, even though he was an excellent drake. Luke had been pouring magic into that dragon ever since it was an egg and had been taking good care of it since it was born. Tears started falling on his cheeks as he questioned why he was crying. Were these tears Luke's emotions? The king scoffed and couldn't believe that even he could feel sad about that. Luke asked his father to leave him alone for a while, and the king turned away, saying it was too late to regret now and that he should remember what he had done. After a while, the emotions from his memories have finally settled down. It seems he'll have to do a bit of memory reviewing and sorting. He had been reincarnated as the 15-year-old Luke A. Volg. Other than being able to control a dragon, he was the lowest-ranking student in his class. Even if he was an idiot, he was still an elite. He was accepted to the Dragon Knight Academy, which not many can enter. The incident happened on the last day of the midterm exams when the king came to watch the practical writing test. At the time, Luke smirked and thought he'd show the king what he could do. Unlike humans, a dragon's field of view is 350 degrees, and they didn't like it when someone was in their only blind spot. A dragon that sees something enter their blind spot has a habit of reflexively attacking with its tail, and that led to the accident. Luke must have instantly died at that point. Luke thought about it and wondered if that AI voice thing was given by the goddess. Earlier in the plane, the goddess told him he'd give him a set of 3 heroic summoning cheats as support. They would be appraisal, search, and storage. He told the goddess he also wanted an AI navigation, the one that does that navigation for him, like in games. She asked if those were the ones commonly found in Enmos before saying she understood. Because of the magic sealing bracelet, he couldn't hear the navigation AI, and it looked like he couldn't call it either. Just then, the guard informed him he had visitors. 2 women and a kid entered his room. Luke apologized to his mother, but his mother immediately scolded him, saying he was unbelievable, and asked just how much trouble he wanted to cause. Another woman, his stepmother, was glad he was awake and safe. Luke apologized for making her worry about him. Then, his little sister hugged him and asked if his injuries were better now. Luke answered that they were and apologized for making his little sister, Kairaru, worry about him, too. But he was fine now. His mother called and informed him that his treatment would be decided in the next few days, so he should sit still in the meantime. Luke was confused and asked what she meant by treatment, and his mother angrily asked what he was talking about. She questioned if he thought a student who had lost his dragon could still attend the Dragon Knight Academy. Luke understood, though he thought she was scary. After they left, Luke sat at his desk when someone knocked on his door. The guard announced he had visitors, and he got up from his chair. He thought there were a lot of people visiting him today. Once the door opened, a short-haired girl rushed to hug him. This girl is the 16-year-old Luludi C. Meryl, the second daughter of the Marquis. When she was 6, she got engaged to Luke, and it seems Luke has always been very fond of her. Luludi was still hugging him and worried about him since he hadn't woken up in 2 days. Luke apologized for making her worry. His sister, who was watching them, was thankful that he looked better than she expected, and Luke also apologized for worrying her. His sister informed him that although it was hard to say, his engagement to Luludi had been called off. Luke was surprised and asked what she meant. His sister stated that she didn't know all the details, but she was sure this incident was the cause. He asked Luludi if she had heard anything about it, and Luludi nodded. She explained that today at noon, the king himself had come to visit her residence to talk about breaking off their engagement with her father. Her father also felt uneasy about his recent behavior and agreed to end the engagement. He didn't give her any more details than that. Luke thought it couldn't be helped. Because of Luludi's involvement with him, she had been labeled a disgrace. He apologized, but he understood her father's feelings. He asked if she could tell her father that he'd be coming to apologize when his house arrest was lifted. Luludi asked if Luke was agreeing to break off the engagement, and Luke replied that she should find a better partner than him, the Orc Prince. She teared up, even though she'd been waiting for him to return to his old self. She shouted that he was cruel and called him an idiot. Luludi ran away, and Luke stared at her, wondering what had just happened. He was not a dense light novel protagonist, so he understood. Did Luludi like Luke, too? His sister angrily asked what he was contemplating about and ordered him to go after Luludi immediately. Luke reasoned that he was on house arrest, which caused his sister to slap him and call him stupid. He cried, not understanding. When his sister left, a guard checked on him and saw him crying. He wondered if there would be a rumor that he was crying because both his fiancée and sister dumped him. The next day, Luke sat on his bed, feeling sad about what happened to Luludi yesterday. His memories were evoking emotions, and he didn't want that. Just because Luke liked her didn't mean he liked her, too. So, it was hard for him to deal with someone who was suddenly his fiancée. He was sure the goddess had him reincarnate as a prince in the first place because of the time and money needed to give him the strength to defeat the evil god. With the backing of the royal family, he could do seemingly impossible things. He clenched his fist, determined to do strength training to lose weight. Since he was on house arrest, no one would come. Also, he was bored. It was for the sake of defeating the evil god, though he couldn't even do one sit-up yet. But once he's decided to do something, he'll accomplish it. Night came, and a maid served him his dinner. She bowed and told him to enjoy his meal. He called her, but she ignored him and continued walking away. He was sure she was still upset that he peeped at her while she was taking a bath. He knew he was not the one who did it, but it didn't feel right. The only one he could complain to was the goddess who reincarnated him as the Orc Prince. Speaking of which, she was this world's chief god. If he's not mistaken, this world's chief god is Nereid, the goddess of water. It has been 10 days since his sister and Luludi came to visit, and nobody has visited since. With nothing to do, he worked hard on his strength training. He touched his belly, noticing that he'd lost some weight. Just then, a guard informed him that the king was there to see him. His father, the king, entered his bedroom. He bowed, welcoming him, and his father said he had something he needed to tell him urgently. Luke stated he'd accept any punishment he declared, but the king told him it was not right to call it a punishment. Although he did break the rules, it was not a criminal offense. Luke asked what would happen to him, and the king explained that losing his dragon got him expelled from the Dragon Knight Academy that day. So, the expulsion had already been decided. Luke replied that he was prepared for it. The king continued, saying he'd been working on getting him transferred from the Dragon Knight Academy to the Magic Academy, but his score on the Dragon Knight Academy entrance exam was too poor. He's never been more embarrassed in his life. He can't tell him how embarrassing that was. Luke understood because he even had a private tutor. He wondered if this was the reason the king was so angry. The king had no choice but to send him to the Knight Academy, but he thought it would be too hard for Luke because of his fat body. The king paused, noticing Luke's body, and asked if he lost some weight. Luke answered affirmatively, explaining that he started trying to lose weight. The king didn't think losing a little weight could help him at the Knight Academy, but Luke retorted that he had to go somewhere to keep up appearance as a royal family. The king exclaimed that his disgraceful behavior would remain a stain on the royal family's name. Luke apologized while internally cursing the original Luke. Because of him, he had to keep apologizing. The king cleared his throat and informed Luke that he had talked with the cabinet minister about what to do. They gave him a pretty good suggestion, and he decided to make Luke someone's husband in the neighboring kingdom. Luke was confused after hearing that. So, that was the reason why the engagement with Luludi was called off. He complained, asking for a break, because this was not the reason he came to this world. The king tried to comfort him, explaining that being someone's husband was not always a bad thing. He asked if Luke knew the neighboring kingdom, Forel, and informed him that he would marry and become a part of Duke Forrest's family. The Duke had 3 daughters, but since his wife was ill, they couldn't hope for more children, so he decided to take a husband for his eldest daughter. Luke would be attending the night school's magic department there. The Duke's daughter also goes to the same school, and he'll get married after graduation. Luke tried to retort that he already had a splendid fiancée named Luludi. The king was sure he'd heard that the engagement had been called off. He told him to reflect on the stupid things that he's done in his life, and to just give up on Luludi. Luke asked if the other nations were aware of his behavior, and the king explained that the kingdom of Forel was a vassal kingdom derived from this kingdom. It was a small kingdom with only a 50th of their population. To prevent their blood from becoming unbalanced between aristocrats, they would take husbands or wives from a friendly kingdom once every few years. They would look for blood from a superior noble family lineage that could use magic. Until now, their country has only sent husbands or wives from a count's family. But now, they want a husband for the duke's family. So, someone from a count family would not suffice. Luke questioned whether the king was using this as an opportunity to get rid of a stupid prince because the neighboring kingdom needed a high-ranking noble son. The king denied the accusation, saying his behavior didn't matter. It was only because they sought blood from a family with superior magical attributes. Luke was indeed a direct descendant of the royal family. Moreover, his main attribute was the rare holy attribute. He was an ideal stud horse. He thought that made sense. If he thought about it, that would probably be more convenient than being in this country. He'd have more freedom if he weren't living under his father. It was not that bad. The king knew Luke wasn't satisfied, but he had to do his part as a member of the royal family. He knew it was sudden, but Luke will be leaving early tomorrow morning. Luke exclaimed in surprise after finding out that he would be leaving tomorrow. He sighed, told his father that he understood, and asked what kind of person his partner was. The king responded that they had almost no information about the girl, so he'd know when he got there. Luke wondered if the king was hiding something since he wanted to send a husband from the royal family, but knew nothing about the other side. Luke replied that he understood and asked his father to remove the magic sealing bracelet because he wanted to organize his luggage. The king raised his hand and refused. The magic sealing bracelet wouldn't be removed until he was delivered to a duke since he would immediately run away. He handed Luke a chest containing 100 million jennies as a dowry from the treasury and 1,000,000 jennies from him for himself. The king turned to leave his room, telling him to just buy it from there if he needed something. The following day, the first prince, Yale, complained that he didn't understand why they had to leave without informing their family. The king asked Yale to understand since this was for Luke's sake. Yale asked what part of suddenly becoming someone's husband in a neighboring kingdom was for Luke's sake. Luke waved his hand, assuring his brother that it was okay. He explained that it would take 15 days by carriage, so it would be faster if Yale took him off with his dragon. He asked him to understand his considerations as well, but Yale was about to retort again when he explained that he was chosen to escort him because if he were to escape, the blame would be put on him, who was responsible for him as his escort. Yale turned to their father and asked if that was truly the case. The king responded that there was that, too, before asking Luke not to say things like that even if he knew it was true. Luke had a mischievous expression when he said he at least could get his revenge. They rode the drake as it flew through the sky. If they were traveling by drake, they were unlikely to be attacked. Yale didn't understand what their father was thinking this time and assured Luke that it was not like their father didn't like him. Luke mumbled, but it still felt like he'd been abandoned by his parents, and Yale told him not to say that. He could do anything if he tried. So, from now on, he will have to work harder, which Luke agreed to. They arrived at 4 kingdoms bordering territory. A guard saluted them and thanked them for coming. Then, he asked them to take a break in the mansion, which Yale declined because they were traveling as quickly as they could, so they'd just keep going. If that was the case, the guard wished them a safe journey. Luke was petting the drake when a child suddenly approached him, asking if he'd like to buy some flowers. The guard told off the child, saying a flower seller should never speak to nobles. The child apologized, but Luke crouched and comforted her before asking how much they cost. The child answered that it was 50 jennies per bundle, and Luke handed her a gold coin, asking if that was enough for him to have the whole basket. The child was surprised to see the gold coin and explained she didn't have the change for a gold coin, so Luke told her the change was for her. She hesitated, but the guard told her just to thank Luke and leave. After taking the gold coin, the child bowed and thanked him. This would help her mother recover from her injuries. Luke asked if her mother was hurt, and the child answered affirmatively. Yale took a bottle from his inventory and handed it to Luke. Luke turned to him, thinking it was expected of his brother. He took the bottle and gave it to the child, asking her to take it since it was intermediate-level recovery medicine. The girl refused and stutteringly said she couldn't afford such an expensive thing, but Luke insisted she take it. After taking the bottle, the walking away child bowed and thanked them again. Yale made fun of him, saying he had a soft spot for kids, though he wasn't very popular. Luke responded that he was too much before continuing their journey. As they were flying, Luke spotted a carriage being attacked by bandits. He pointed to them and told his brother about it. Yale looked down and said he was right. He couldn't put Luke in any danger since he had to deliver him safely. However, the family badge on that carriage seemed to belong to the Forel royal family, so there was most likely royalty in that carriage. That was not something they, of the royal family, could overlook. He was on a mission, but he was going to help them, so Luke should go and hide somewhere else. Luke refused because this whole thing would be cancelled if anything happened to him. Then, Yale decided he'd help them all at once. Luke told him to wait, and Yale looked back, asking what it was since they must hurry. Luke asked him to remove the magic sealing bracelet because he couldn't do anything with them on his wrists. After the magic sealing bracelet was off, the AI navigator greeted him. He greeted it back and asked it to tell him about their situation immediately. The AI navigator informed him that fighting at this level was dangerous and asked him to check his status. He checked his status and questioned what was with his level since Luke used to be level 18. The AI navigator explained that it was because he reincarnated that his status would be treated the same as a newborn's. Luke facepalmed. No wonder he felt like he was going to die just from being hit. He seemed to have completely inherited Luke's skills, but he wondered if he really had to be at least level 10 to use beginner magic. He checked his inventory and noticed it seemed to be full of restorative medicine. He took out 4 bottles and told Yale to take the medicine he had made. There were a lot of them. Then, he took out a bow. He used to be a second Dan in Kudo, so he could maybe at least support him. He told Yale he'd support him from the skies, which Yale agreed to. He asked Vals, Yale's drake, to take care of him, and it growled happily. They approached the battle, and Luke told Vals to use Aurora Cutter Storm. Various blades cut the bandits, making them scream in pain. The bandits exclaimed after seeing a drake and wondered why there was a drake in a place like this. Yale jumped down to fight the bandits while Luke shot arrows as support. Luke felt nauseous at the thought of him killing people with his own hands. Nevertheless, he was amazed at the accuracy of his shots and wondered if there was some kind of ice sky correction system. The AI navigator notified him that all beginner magic had been unlocked because his race level had risen to 10. He was confused that he was already at level 10, but thought it was good. He chanted Aqua Heal to heal the 4 royal knights, who thanked him in return. Luke approached the carriage, feeling discomfort. He approached them, and the robed man clicked his tongue before taking out 3 throwing knives. However, he was hit with Thunder Spear before he could do anything. The robed man collapsed. Meanwhile, Luke descended, took off the man's robe, and discovered countless knives inside. He rode the drake and flew over to Yale, who just finished fighting with the bandits. It was, of course, his victory. He got off the drake and healed the injured knights. He asked Yale if he was hurt, and Yale responded that they cut him a few times, but he was fine. Then, he praised Luke for his magnificent combat support. He was just as amazing as he thought, so he asked why Luke always pretended to be stupid. Luke flinched and told him he thought too highly of him. He then expressed how he was not fit to be a knight because his limbs were shaking from the act of killing. Yale told him not to worry because he was no different from him. Luke was confused and glanced at Yale's arm. He was trembling. The knights approached them and thanked them for their help and for saving their lives. Yale faced them and introduced himself. He is the first prince of the Volg kingdom, Yale Volg. He then gestured to Luke, and Luke introduced himself as well, saying he was the third son of the Volg royal family. The knights kneeled to show respect, and Yale stated that he was escorting his brother, Luke, but they saw the battle from above and decided to help. Then, he asked who the master of the troops was. At that moment, the carriage door opened, and a woman stepped out. She thanked Yale and Luke for their help before introducing herself. She is the second princess of the Forel kingdom, Miufa Forel. Luke stared at her, thinking she was a princess he'd never seen before. He should have seen her at least once since she was from a vassal state. Suddenly, the knight next to her collapsed. She was the one guarding the carriage and was wounded by a throwing knife, but it had already healed. The other knights came closer and asked what was going on. Luke thought she might be poisoned, so he told them to let him check the wound as soon as possible. Yale had a proud smile, boasting that his brother, Luke, was a healer who could use water and holy healing magic, so they should leave it to him. Luke asks one of the knights to assist him and checks the woman's condition. There is a black wound near her collarbone, and the others ask what that is. The AI navigator informed Luke that it was poison, and that 3 others were poisoned as well. Luke wondered if it could know their conditions without seeing them, and the AI navigator told him to use appraisal magic. After using appraisal magic, a screen stated that the poison was a dart frog poison. It was not an instant death poison and could only be cured with an advanced level antidote or higher. Luke exclaimed that this was bad. It was a poison from a dart frog. It won't kill her straight away, but it was dangerous. He asked if there was anyone who could use advanced level recovery magic or have an advanced level antidote. The knight captain held a potion bottle and said the one who could use advanced level recovery magic was killed. As a knight commander, he had an advanced level antidote, and the woman next to him also had one. Luke asked to confirm if other people were injured, and 3 men raised their hands. One of them was the knight commander. Luke asked his brother if he had an antidote. Yale answered that he had 2, but he had already used one. Luke thought that was a wise decision. The knight commander told them to let 2 of his subordinates drink it, and he'd take the intermediate level antidote. The 2 cried, calling out to their captain. Then, Luke opened his inventory and told the captain he had some, too, and to take it. Yale screamed after realizing Luke had tested the captain. Luke explained that it was because he thought that royalty and nobility should always have a variety of recovery agents on hand. This country must be very peaceful if the princess doesn't even have one. Then, he asked the princess to confirm if these troops were worth more than an antidote. Miufa answered affirmatively and would make sure to bring enough for everyone from now on. Luke nodded but still couldn't get rid of this sense of discomfort. Did he miss something? The AI navigator told him to use search magic, so he did. It showed a map of the forest they were in, showing various marks. White meant ordinary humans, blue meant party members, green meant friendly, yellow meant hostile, red meant bloodlust, purple meant magical beasts, and the skull meant it was a trap. The AI navigator informed him that if he increases his skill level, he'll be able to search a wider area. It was amazing. He noticed one red mark, so someone was still there. If only he could use it with appraisal magic, he'd be able to find him easily. The AI navigator informed him that he could display that image if he clicked the red mark. Once he clicked the red mark, the image was displayed. There was an assassin holding a bow, targeting the princess with a poisoned arrow. Luke ran to defend the princess with a shield. He commanded the knights to get the princess in the carriage since the enemy was still there. A knight noticed the assassin running away and claimed they wouldn't catch up even if they started chasing him. Luke summoned a bow from his inventory and shot 3 arrows, hitting the assassin and his horse. A knight was shocked and found it amazing that he could hit him at that distance. Meanwhile, Luke ordered Vals to capture the assassin alive. Vals dropped the unconscious assassin, earning praise from Luke. He then handed Vals a monster's corpse as a reward, which the drake happily took. Yale approached them, annoyed. That was why Vals liked Luke more than him. He'd always been feeding Vals like this. Luke flinched and turned back, responding that Yale was the one Vals liked most. Yale asked if he knew Val's favorite food, and if it was an orc. Luke exclaimed that he was wrong, and informed him that Vals actually liked goblin the most. Yale was surprised and asked Vals if he really liked that stinky meat. Vals growled happily as a response. Yale was in shock and asked why he hadn't told him. Luke replied that the master should be the first to know about such things. Suddenly, a knight dashed, pulling his sword. He was trying to attack the 2 assassins they caught, so Luke stopped him. The knight asked what he was doing, and Luke responded that was his line. The knight reasoned that those guys killed his comrades. Luke called out to his brother, who responded that he got it before taking the magic sealing bracelet out of his inventory and putting it on the knight. Seeing this, the knight captain asked why they were restraining him. Luke believed those 2 assassins weren't part of the bandits, confusing Miufa. She still can't help but think they are bandits, so Luke points out that their items are expensive and specialize in assassination. He thinks they were disguised as bandits, but their real purpose was to assassinate the princess. Then, Luke was asked why he had detained the knight, to which he replied that he suspected he was one of the conspirators. The detained knight shouted that he was not one of them. Yale explained that the royal family's mobilization wasn't disclosed to the public, and they couldn't set up an ambush without someone guiding them. The knight tried to kill the assassins to keep their mouths shut since, normally, a knight wouldn't kill them, but would instead interrogate them. Miufa walked towards the knight and asked if he was one of them. The knight swore to God that he was not, and Miufa smiled, relieved, before telling the Vogue princes that the knight wasn't one of them. Seeing their confused expressions, she explained that she was a first-class inquisitor who could see through lies. Inquisitor was a unique skill granted by the gods. In exchange for the ability to see through lies, the holder of this skill could not lie. Yale removed the magic sealing bracelet on the knight's wrists, and Luke asked Miufa if she was there on official business. Miufa answered in affirmation and explained that there was some tax embezzlement in a marquis territory, so she was on her way there because she heard their informants had captured some important witnesses. Luke thought killing the princess was only a temporary measure. Miufa sighed, explaining that it would take at least 2 weeks before they could arrange for another inquisitor after they killed her. Yale added that they would try to destroy the evidence in that time span, to which Miufa responded with a nod, saying that was most likely. The naked assassin snickered, saying he didn't know what they were talking about since he was just doing this for money. Miufa confirmed that what he was saying seemed to be true. Miufa asked him to tell her about his employer, and the assassin responded that there was no way they would have told him who they were. Miufa thought for a while before concluding that they couldn't get any information out of him. Seeing the assassin do something with his hand, Luke immediately pushed the princess away and stabbed the assassin's chest. The others were shocked, and Yale asked Luke what he was doing. The AI navigator notified him that he was now level 20. His level had gone up a lot. Miufa crossed her arms and asked what was wrong or if something had happened. Luke turned to her and asked if she had poor eyesight, and Miufa answered yes. She could barely distinguish a person's appearance. That aside, she asked why he killed the assassin even though he stopped their knight. Luke just remembered how easy it was to take off the magic sealing bracelet, and then he saw the assassin's hand make a strange movement. He looked down at the assassin's hand and saw one of the bracelets was off, and he had something in his hand. Just as he thought, the magic sealing bracelet had been removed. Yale also noticed a small blowpipe in his hand. Luke activated appraisal magic and, upon seeing the information on the screen, realized that it was an instant death poison. Miufa was terrified and asked if the bracelet was really so easy to remove. Luke called the knight captain over and asked him to put a chain on the bracelet and try to restrain him. Now, he had been restrained by the captain using the magic sealing bracelet, but something would happen 5 seconds from now. He raised his hand and started counting Yale, who seemed to have seen something, called out to him. Miufa wondered if Yale had noticed something. However, Luke came closer and said there was something on her shoulder. Then, a rose appeared. He handed the rose to Miufa, and Yale explained that Luke's arms were supposed to be tied behind his back, but he could raise his right hand to count and take a flower out. Miufa seemed to have finally realized what he had done. Luke showed her the bracelet and the thing he had used to unlock it, saying the bracelet was easy to remove using this. If she had been in the assassin's range, he probably would have killed her. Miufa was grateful that he had protected her 3 times while Yale looked at him with suspicion. That meant he could have escaped at any time. Luke stated that things would be more difficult if their father found out. Yale suggested they put that bracelet on his wrists again, which Luke refused. He had already said that he wouldn't escape again. Plus, the princess and her knights were there. Miufa asked why he needed to put a magic sealing bracelet on Luke. Luke looked at Yale as if threatening him not to say a thing. But despite that, Yale responded that they couldn't hide it forever. He explained to Miufa that Luke had a habit of running away, so their father directly ordered him not to take off the bracelet until he handed Luke over to the Duke. Miufa laughed and told him he must not have the king's trust if he gave this order. Luke frowned, blaming his father for choosing him as a fiancé, and said he would regret it if he got complaints. Miufa found him interesting. Yale told Luke to clear his entire friends list before he put on the bracelet. Now that Luke thought about it, there was such a system to prevent espionage. He obeyed and cleared his friends list before asking Yale to check it. Miufa, who was watching them, asked Luke if he would like to be her friend, to which he replied that he did. Luke was honored to have his first friend in this country be the princess herself, and Miufa was elated that Luke seemed not to be lying. The knight captain whispered something to Miufa, and she told Yale that she was going back to the Duchy of Forest, where her uncle lived, and asked if he would stay with them until then. Yale thought it sounded good, and Miufa informed him that the Duke's knights would arrive soon and asked them to wait for a moment. Luke distributed flowers to the knights while Yale talked to the knight captain. Finally, the Duke's knights have arrived. However, they were all glaring at Luke, making him wonder why. Luke called his brother and told him all the knights were glaring at him intensely. He asked why that was the case. Yale scowled at the knights, asking what made them think it was okay to intimidate his brother, and if any of them were aware that this act could be considered as a lese majesty. Miufa asked the knights why they were doing this, and said it was extremely rude for them to have such murderous intent toward an important guest from the superior kingdom. She asked if they realized they were obligated to beg for Luke's pardon. The knights kneeled and mumbled that they were sorry, but Miufa asked who they were apologizing to, so they bowed toward Luke and apologized for their discourtesy. Luke asked what the point of an apology was if they didn't mean it. Yale flinched, calling out his name. In this situation, even if he knew that was the case, he should just accept it. However, Luke ignored his brother's scolding and asked Miufa for help, because he wanted to know the reason for their actions. Miufa understood and asked Captain Kyle whether all the knights had something in common with Luke. Kyle tried to deny it. However, Miyufa reminded him of her unique skills and claimed not to tolerate lies. The next time he lies to her, she will question his loyalty to the royal family. Kyle exclaimed that they all adored Emilia. Luke was confused and asked who that was. Kyle asked if he did not even know his fiancée's name and felt pity for Emilia. Luke explained that he had only been told that he would marry the Duke's daughter. Kyle continued, saying no one would complain if the man Emilia would marry was Yale, but Luke's bad reputation was well known even in their country. Luke thought this was a huge miscalculation. That aside, he asked how everyone knew his name. Miyufa answered that troubadours from the Vogue Kingdom go there regularly and talked about him in an interesting way. Yale asked if they didn't punish people who disrespected the royal family in this country, and Miyufa explained that the troubadours were just telling a story about the orc prince from a great kingdom. Luke was angry, so that was how they all knew about him. Miyufa tried to calm him down and led him to the carriage. Inside the carriage, the woman who collapsed earlier introduced herself. She is the princess' personal combat maid, Erica D. Francis. She thanked Luke as he was Miyufa's benefactor, and Luke replied that he was just glad he recognized the poison. Luke asked what kind of person Emilia was, and Miyufa explained they were cousins. Emilia had severe androphobia, so she didn't take part in any social interactions. Despite that, she still wanted to attend the night school and has been accepted into the magic department as the top of her class. Luke asked how she could be engaged to him, a complete stranger. Wasn't that absurd? Miyufa agreed and said she didn't know what Emilia's father was thinking. He wondered what his objective could be. Luke looked out the carriage window, singing about his situation. Miyufa and Erica laughed. Miyufa told Luke that it was a sad song and asked if he really was so unhappy with this marriage arrangement. He sighed, claiming he didn't want his parents to set his marriage up, and asked if she didn't feel the same way. Miyufa said she was born with poor eyesight, so she didn't have the luxury to say that. As someone with the first-class Inquisitor skill, she didn't think anyone would want her since she would just be a nuisance. Luke told her that it would be fine as long as they didn't tell lies. Even if they didn't look on the bright side, her attractiveness was more than enough to compensate. She asked if he really meant it, and Luke assured her that she really was beautiful. Miyufa was thrilled because he wasn't lying. Just then, Erica announced they were almost at the Duke's estate. Luke didn't like it. Noticing Luke's expression, Miyufa asked if he was all right, and Luke responded that he was. He thinks his brother would be at the city gate, leaving Val's behind and going with him. At last, he could finally say goodbye to the bracelet. Luke met with Yale at the city gate after he got off Miyufa's carriage. Yale asked if he enjoyed his carriage ride, to which Luke replied that he did. Then, they'll head out together to the Duke Forest's estate using the carriage he prepared. The two transferred to a different carriage, and Luke asked the AI navigator, Fairy, what had happened to the girl he was trying to save. Fairy responded that he didn't know about the events in Luke's former world, and told him to go to the temple and talk to the goddess. Luke thought he should be able to get to the temple soon. They finally arrived at Duke Forest Estate. They got off the carriage and were greeted by the head of the Forest family, Yale B. Forest. He thanked them for saving his niece's life, and Yale responded that they just did what they had to do. In that case, Duke Yale decided to introduce them to everyone. When Duke Yale opened the mansion doors, the servants bowed to greet them. Yale whispered to Luke not to peek into the maid's bath or dressing room. They entered the dining room, and his daughters were there. The girl introduced herself. She is Anna, the second daughter of the Forest family, and the kid hiding behind her is Rara. Duke Yale asked Rara to introduce herself properly and said he was ashamed that she couldn't. Luke sighed while Duke Yale explained that his eldest daughter, Emilia, was away from home at the moment since she was taking her midterm exams at the Night Academy, and his wife was not feeling well enough to come and introduce herself, in addition to her disease being contagious. Yale hoped she would get well soon before he and Luke introduced themselves. Anna exclaimed that Luke really was a pig and felt sorry for her sister. Duke Yale scolded Anna and hit her in the head. He apologized for his daughter's lack of discipline. Yale responded he was the same, and Luke stared at him, asking what he meant. Duke Yale apologized for bothering them so soon, but he would need Yale and Miyufa to witness the examination. It seems that the king had just gone directly to the Marquis estate with his dragon cavalry, and he needed to make a report on the bandits as soon as possible. After the two agreed, Duke Yale asked Luke if he could stay with Anna and the others and wait for them. Anna turned to him. Her gaze seemed to be complaining. Fairy said that Duke Yale seemed to dare to leave Anna and Rara alone with him because he wanted to see how he would behave towards them. Even if it was the king's order, it was his own daughter who would marry him. If Luke was as much of a scumbag as rumored, Duke Yale was ready to push back. Luke agreed to Duke Yale's request and was soon left alone with the others. Luke and Anna sat on separate sides of the table while Rara hid behind her sister. Erica made some tea and served it to them. However, Anna continued to glare at him. It was awkward. He pulled a paper out and folded it. Erica asked what those were, and Luke replied that they were wyverns. Rara peeked and seemed to be interested. Anna crossed her arms, asking if it wasn't a drake. She heard he was a former dragon knight, though she also heard that he let his precious dragon die. Now, Luke was going to bring it to life. Anna sighed, asking if he was stupid since it was made of paper. Luke ignored her rude remarks and cast light and float on the papers, making them float. Rara was amazed and approached Luke, asking for one, too. Luke agreed, and they made more paper wyverns. After a while, Luke excused himself because he had to go to the toilet. Rara offered to take him there, but Anna rang the bell. A maid entered the dining room, and Anna asked her to take Luke to the bathroom. The maid, Iris, agreed and led him to the bathroom. In this world, the toilet was a vault toilet and should be on the ground floor. Fairy informed him that the maid purifies the toilet with clean after every use in this estate. After using the toilet, Luke chanted clean and wondered where all the clean stuff went. Fairy answered that it went to another dimension and seemed to be transported to a place in the same dimension as his inventory. Then, it told him this was a secret and asked him not to tell anyone. Luke went out of the bathroom, asking if it was the circumstances of a god. Iris went inside the bathroom to clean and peeked outside, asking if Luke was done with his business. He replied that he cast clean himself. Suddenly, they heard a cough coming from a room. He commented that those were painful coughs and noticed they came from the back room where the lady was resting. Fairy informed him that the lady had what Luke's former world called tuberculosis, and the patient was isolated as it was classified as an incurable disease. Luke asked if the spread of the disease could be prevented with barrier magic, to which Fairy replied yes, it could. Luke said he'd say a few words to the lady, and Iris immediately stopped him. She explained the lady was resting in the back room because the disease was contagious. He told her she could wait outside and just wait a bit for him. Luke entered the bedroom, and the lady who was resting on her bed asked who he was. Several years ago, one of the maids was exhausted finding Luke and exclaimed that the private tutor was extremely angry. Meanwhile, in the garden, an old woman asks young Master Luke if it isn't time for his studies. Luke told her he wanted to be her apprentice, and she answered that her guidance was very strict. Back to the present, Luke cast an air shield and introduced himself. He had come to the Forest family as a future adopted son-in-law. The lady realized he had come to greet him personally before introducing herself. She is Jael's wife, Sasha. Then, she asked him to leave the room immediately because he couldn't catch the disease. However, she couldn't finish her sentence when she suddenly coughed up blood. The maid, Iris, apologized and explained she tried to stop Luke, but he insisted on coming. Fairy explained that they do not know about germs in this world, so using magic against disease was not very effective. Luke thought it was hard for the magic to work if they couldn't understand and visualize. He cast Aqua Heal, Clean, and Aqua Cure toward Sasha. He asked Fairy about it, and Fairy responded that he was able to ease some symptoms, but the disease was still terminal. However, Fairy thinks the current magic will cure her after 10 days of daily treatment. Sasha felt much better, and her complexion looked healthier. She thanked Luke. It seemed they chose an outstanding man for his adopted son-in-law. Fairy commented that it looked like Sasha didn't know about his terrible reputation. Iris asked Luke if she could ask about his magic. She questioned why he cast the intermediate water recovery magic, Aqua Heal, and why he cast Clean and the intermediate level detoxification magic, Aqua Cure. Luke raised his hands to stop her from asking any more questions because he couldn't answer that many questions at once. Sasha apologized and explained that Iris wanted to be a holy healer. Suddenly, the door opened, and the angry Duke Jael entered along with Erica and Yale. He reminded Luke that he had already said he couldn't see his wife because she had a contagious disease. It seemed Iris called Duke Jael earlier. Fairy notified him they thought he forced his way in out of curiosity. Meanwhile, Sasha called her husband, Duke Jael, and informed him that Luke had cast recovery magic on her. Her fever had gone down, and her cough had gone away. Luke responded that if he had the time, he could cure it. Duke Jael was surprised and exclaimed that it couldn't be because his wife's illness was consumption. However, he soon froze in shock after his wife muttered she knew it with a dark expression. Yale chimed in and asked Luke if it was true that he could cure Sasha's illness. Luke responded that it would be possible if he did it every day for 10 days. Yale was confused and said that if their father had known of his power, he wouldn't have made him an adopted son-in-law. Luke suggested that he'd go to the academy after he completely cured the illness. Duke Jael questioned whether he could really cure it because even the Pope was unable to do it. Then, he informed Luke that 5 days after the midterm exams, all the students must take part in the monster summoning ceremony, and asked if he was fine with that. Luke asked about the monster summoning, and Yale explained it, sighing. It was similar to when they all formed a contract with a Drake at the Dargan Night School. Luke asked if he could do it later, and Duke Jael explained that there were restrictions on the time of day and the rotation of the stars. The summoning circle can only be used once a year on a certain day at a certain time, and the summoning circles in the temple are also on the same cycle, so they can't be performed at a later date. After explaining, Duke Jael asked Luke if it was fine to stop his wife's treatment on the day of the summoning ceremony and start treating her again right after. Luke thought it was safe to say that the disease wouldn't immediately worsen after stopping the treatment, so Duke Jael told him he'd ask the principal for permission to be absent for a few days, which Luke agreed to. Suddenly, they heard Sasha's stomach growl, causing her to be embarrassed. Luke commented that she'd worked up an appetite, and Sasha replied that she hadn't eaten much lately. Duke Jael invited Yale and Luke to dine first if that was all right, to which Yale replied that there was no problem. Luke turned to Sasha and asked her to join them, even for a short time, because Rara was lonely, too. She felt sorry after hearing about Rara's loneliness. Luke assured her he'd put up a magic shield so she wouldn't transmit the disease. Sasha asked if he was sure it was safe and thought about it a little more before looking up with a determined expression, saying she'd like to meet her daughters. Luke thought for a while and claimed they needed foods that were easy to eat and digest. He asked if they had rice, and Duke Jael answered that they did, but he heard it was bad for digestion. The staple food there was bread and soup when someone had a cold. Luke asked for Duke Jael's permission to use the kitchen, and Yale immediately warned him not to do anything he didn't have to. Luke replied that he just wanted to make some medicinal food that was good for Sasha's health. Duke Jael exclaimed that Luke could use the kitchen as he pleased if it were for making food that was good for Sasha's health. Yale was surprised, and Luke just told Sasha he'd call her when the food was ready. Once they left her bedroom, he cast Clean. Iris was curious why Luke cast Clean again and asked what it did. Luke responded that it also effectively cleans the invisible sources of disease. Duke Jael let out a cough, and Iris immediately escorted Luke to the kitchen. When they arrived in the kitchen, Luke looked around while Duke Jael spoke to the cook. Luke asked what meat was on the counter, and the cook replied that it was the meat of bovine beasts. Fairy informed him that it was the meat of a beast called rush buffalo, an ultra-high-grade ingredient. Luke gathered the ingredients he needed, as well as some rice and a basket of tomatoes. The menu was set. He started chopping the meat, which the others thought was a waste, and shaped them into balls. After cooking, he poured the sauce on the cooked meat. It was a demi-glazed steak. Luke tried the soup with a little extra tomato risotto and thought it was okay, but the lack of Worcestershire sauce and soy sauce was a flaw. The tomato risotto tasted good, though. He handed the tray to the cook and asked him to bake it the same way as before and serve it to Rara and the others. Then, he informed them that Sasha's food should be served in small portions. He left the kitchen and went to Sasha's room. He cast an air shield before asking if she was taking it easy and saying she should return to her room immediately if it got too hard. Sasha said she was fine since she wasn't wearing anything tight. He escorted her to the dining room, and her daughters excitedly greeted her and ran over to her. However, Luke blocked and stopped them, explaining that he'd cast protection magic on them if they wanted to hug each other. After casting protection magic, the three emotionally reunited and hugged each other. Once they were all seated at the dining table, the servants served their food, and Luke told Sasha to eat the medicinal foods he had made for her slowly. His cuisine earned various praise, and Mufa said she'd like to try Luke's cooking as well. Duke Jael asked Luke if there were any more ingredients because he'd like to try them, too. Luke stated the cooks would make it for them if they asked since they'd already done the extra spade work. After the dishes were served, Rara exclaimed that they were very delicious. Duke Jael wondered if it was the royal cuisine from the Vogue Kingdom, but before Luke could answer, Yael had already spoken to tease him, saying he used to sneak into the kitchen at night to make and eat his food. Mufa laughed and commented that was why he was a little fat. After they finished their meal, Duke Jael asked Sasha how her condition was. Sasha replied that she was well, and even wondered if she had already healed. Luke waved his hand, saying it was only temporary. Intermediate magic would not cure her instantly. Rara asked if her mother was still not cured, and Luke responded that she wasn't, but he would definitely cure her, so she didn't have to worry. Mufa exclaimed in admiration, found Luke's words were not lies, and asked if he really could cure her. Duke Jael asked Mufa if that was true and was thankful Sasha could be cured. Rara stood up and thanked Luke. In gratitude, she would play the piano for him. She took the white cloth off and revealed a grand piano. Duke Jael told her to do it later since they were in the middle of a talk. However, Sasha expressed that she wanted to hear Rara play the piano by herself. Rara started playing the piano. Luke closed his eyes and enjoyed the melody. The timbre was pleasant, and Fairy informed him that it was a top-quality piano resulting from a collaboration between dwarfs and elves. Luke learned the piano until he was in high school and wanted to play it, too. Yael nudged him and said Luke had also learned the piano as a kid. Rara wanted to hear him play the piano, so he stood up and decided to play the polonaise. Then, Luke invited Rara to sing together. Luke played the piano and sang as Rara sang after him. The others listened happily, and Sasha couldn't believe that Rara sang so happily in front of people. Luke loved the sound of the piano and wanted to play it more. He played Chopin's Etude Op. 10, no, 3, Farewell. Yael was astounded while the others listened as if bewitched by the beautiful melody. Mufa found the tone calming and stared at Luke before blushing. Anna commented he was not bad, and Rara cheered, saying he was amazing. Yael stood up and asked when he learned to play so well. Luke responded that it was a secret, and Fairy commented he was stupid. Sasha asked Luke if he could take a look at the servants taking care of her because they were sick and were now recovering in a separate room. Luke agreed. However, Duke Jael explained that he knew how she felt, but she couldn't ask for that. Luke wondered why she couldn't do that and stated he could examine them whenever he wasn't busy. Duke Jael shook his head to say that was not it. Fairy explained that it was because they were servants bought from a slave trader, so letting a noble examine their servants could damage the prestige of the Duke's family. Luke thought it was a silly reason, but Fairy told him it was considered a problem for a noble family. Luke told them it would be better for everyone to get examined since they may have the disease even if they don't show any symptoms. Sasha thanked Luke for his consideration, and Luke told her just to call him by his name as he'll be her adopted son-in-law in the future. Sasha smiled and agreed to do that while Miyufa looked at him confusedly. Fairy told him Miyufa would look at him funny if he behaved differently from what he said in the carriage, but Luke figured that it was better to make a good impression. Yael asked if he really knew if someone was infected when he saw them, and Luke replied that he had a skill similar to appraisal, so he could tell. Yael was surprised he had such skills and thought he really was much better than him. Their father had made a poor decision. Luke commented he thought too highly of him before deciding to examine everyone. He asked Rara to come, and she happily approached him. Luke found her very cute. He raised his hand and chanted, detailed appraisal. However, his skill level was not high enough, so Fairy advised him to raise it by 1 level. He did and cast the magic, detailed appraisal again without chanting it. He praised Rara as a very healthy child, and everything was fine, making her cheer. He appraised the others, but only Duke Jael was infected. However, he was not ill because physically fit people are highly resistant to infection. In many situations, the body's power will suppress the disease before it can develop. Duke Jael, who had been sweating nervously earlier, was relieved to hear that Luke could eliminate the disease and asked him not to scare him like that. Luke asked Duke Jael to let him see the girls who had been taking care of Sasha, so he was led to the room where they were staying. The three were surprised to see the Duke visit them and immediately sat up to greet him. Luke started treating the patients, and the last girl he was treating asked if she was cured. Luke responded that the other two were completely cured, but she was still a little sick. She didn't need to worry, though, because he'd cure her. The long-haired girl called Luke and said she heard that the disease couldn't be cured. But Luke assured them not to worry because it was curable and asked them to take care of their fellow maid and Sasha. They agreed to do it and thanked the Duke. Duke Jael told them Luke was going to be this family's adopted son-in-law, so they should thank him instead. After they left the room, Duke Jael thanked him for today and told him to bathe and wash away today's stress. Luke went to bathe and found his brother there. However, once he submerged himself in the water, Yale got up. He asked if he was done already, and Yale responded that he had to write a report. Soon, Rara entered the bathroom, saying she wanted to join Luke. Luke wondered if that was okay, and Rara's waiting maid apologized, explaining that she had already told Rara she couldn't, but she still insisted on going. Luke didn't mind, but still hesitated. Fairy told him he'd be fine as long as he didn't have any wicked thoughts. Rara asked if she couldn't be with him, and Luke replied that she could and told her to come closer. The maid hesitated to let her, but Luke told her Rara was about the same age as his sister. His sister regularly bathes with him, and he washed her hair, too, so it was fine. The maid bowed and asked him to take care of Rara. They sang the frog song as they bathed while Rara's maid waited outside. After finishing, the maid wrapped Rara in a towel and thanked Luke since it had been a long time since she'd heard Rara's happy voice. Then, she informed him that the Duke would like to speak with him. After changing into his pajamas, he went to the Duke's study to speak with him. Duke Jael apologized about Rara, but Yale responded that Luke was used to bathing with their sister, Kairu. Luke had fun, too, so there was no need to apologize. Duke Jael called him to talk about his attendant for the Night Academy. So, this was about the attendance, Luke asked, and Yale replied that the Dragon Knight School didn't allow him to be accompanied by an attendant. It was a bit sudden, so Duke Jael hadn't prepared an attendant yet, and the best people at his age had already enrolled this year. Luke claimed he didn't need an attendant, but Duke Jael could not allow that. Luke asked if he wanted to attach a ducal's bell to him, and Yale called out his name as if scolding him. Duke Jael said the rumors about him were so bad that he thought he had to put someone on him as insurance. Yale asked Duke Jael to ensure Luke had an attendant because he was also worried, but Luke retorted that he didn't need an attendant. Suddenly, someone interjected into their conversation. It was Iris, who apologized for interrupting their conversation and asked the Duke to make her Luke's attendant. Duke Jael asked if she was saying she wanted to be Luke's concubine. Iris was confused, and Duke Jael asked if she knew Luke would be his adopted son-in-law. If he had an attendant of the opposite gender, the public would see that attendant as a potential concubine. Luke chimed in, saying he preferred that they not talk about this without him. Iris bowed to Luke and introduced herself. She is Iris D. Michael, the eldest daughter of Count Michael. Duke Jael asked if she thought it was impossible for her to become his second wife, so he changed her target to his adopted son-in-law. Iris exclaimed that he was mistaken. She was hoping to learn even a little of Luke's knowledge as a healer and wasn't even thinking about becoming a concubine. Luke thought an attendant would be a hindrance in defeating the evil god, so he told Iris if he had a girl as pretty as her around him all the time, he'd definitely assault her. Duke Jael said they should continue this talk later since it was already late. Luke went back to his room but couldn't sleep. He kept getting flashbacks of the battle earlier today. Just then, he heard a knock on his door. Rara peeked inside and asked if Luke had gone to sleep yet. She approached Luke's bed and said she was lonely because she was sleeping alone, so Luke invited her to sleep with him today. Rara lay beside Luke, and Luke thought she smelled like flowers. He wondered if this was the personal scent from this world, and Fairy said he was right. The scent will reflect the individual's personality, and bad people will smell bad. Luke told Rara she smelled like flowers, and Rara also complimented him. Luke was relieved that he didn't stink. The following day, Erica and Mufa had to leave already. Mufa thanked them and said they'd be heading to the capital first. Yale responded that he'd take Luke to the capital tomorrow with his dragon and told them to take care. Mufa peeked outside the carriage window for the last time before setting off. At the night training grounds, Yale trained with Luke. However, Luke was already gasping, which made Yale say that was terrible. Luke complained that it was painful, and Yale noted this was the same problem as last time. He told Luke to lose weight and train more and commanded him to run around the training ground 10 times. However, Luke refused. Later that day, they went to the Duke's study to continue their discussion last night. Duke Jael informed them that his brother ordered him to put an attendant on Luke, but he hadn't found one yet. If that was the case, Luke didn't care who it was. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and the Duke told them to come in. It was the butler and the maid, Iris. Regarding the attendant, she asked if she wasn't good enough. She'd like to be Luke's apprentice as a healer. Luke turned to her and asked if she wanted to be his disciple of her own volition, even when he said he would put his hands on her. Iris exclaimed that it was her own will. She'd attended the Night Academy for 3 years as an attendant to the daughter of a marquis, and she had never finished lower than 5th in her class. She was also confident in her cooking and asked him to choose her as an attendant. Fairy told Luke that Iris didn't mind, even if he had made her his mistress or concubine, and ultimately abandoned her. Even at worst, make her too late to marry. She just wants to learn from him and help people. Luke was baffled, and Fairy continued, saying Iris' father instructed her to take the position, but she had no malicious intent. Wasn't it better to have her than one who serves directly under the king? Luke called Duke Jael and asked him to make Iris his attendant. Duke Jael sighed, and Luke turned to him, saying Amelia had androphobia, but he ordered her to get married. Duke Jael explained that his brother, the king, arbitrarily decided the whole thing. He was heirless and was in a hurry because of consumption, and then his brother informed him that he had found an adopted son-in-law for him. Luke crossed his arms, added that this adopted son-in-law was the rumored orc prince from the neighboring country, and claimed the king really got the Duke there. Duke Jael said that he intended to expel him if he was as much as rumored, but Rara instantly became attached to him. She had a unique skill to sense other people's malice, and she believed in Rara's power more than any rumor. Iris aside, he asked Luke if he understood his role. Luke wondered if it was to create an heir for this dukedom, and Duke Jael said that was right. However, his brother wanted more than that. There were not enough people in this country with the holy attribute, and since Luke had the holy attribute, he wanted him to have at least 10 children. If it were possible, Anna and Rara would be his wives, too. Luke had become a stud. Duke Jael continued to explain that his brother agreed for Iris to be his attendant because she had the holy attribute. She could be his attendant if she were willing to be Luke's wife. Luke exclaimed that meant having babies was an absolute requirement. Iris claimed she'd rather marry a respectable person like Luke than marry a man she didn't know 2 years from now. Luke wondered if she had a fat fetish, which Iris denied and said she'd take this opportunity to make him lose weight. Iris had officially become his attendant. The next morning, the Forrest family and their servants stood outside to send off Luke together with Yale and Iris. Luke asked Yale to take him to the capital. Iris thanked him for having her as well, and Yale responded that it was no problem. Duke Jael said he'd leave Amelia to Luke, who replied that he'd have to wait and see about her androphobia. Duke Jael appreciated that. After finishing the summoning ceremony, Luke would return on Saturday to cure Sasha and the others. After that, he'll officially enter the school. Luke thought he'd definitely cure Sasha properly, but he would not become a stud for the Duke's family. He didn't know much about this world and couldn't just run away since his body was built like an orc. He'll have to change his condition during his 3 years at school. After arriving at the capital, Luke petted Vals, praised him for a job well done, and said it must have been hard to carry 3 people before thanking the Drake. Yale commented that it was actually more like 4, teasing Luke. Luke took out Val's favorite, a goblin's corpse, and fed it to him. Yale noticed this and scolded Luke for spoiling Val's again. Luke asked Yale what he'd do after this, and Yale responded that he would spend the night in the castle since the king was returning from the Marquis territory tomorrow. After that, he'll have an audience with the king and return to their country. So, this was their goodbye. If that was the case, Luke asked Yale to tell Luludi, Kairuru, and the others how sorry he was that he couldn't properly say goodbye to them. Yale asked if Luke was okay with what happened with Luludi since they seemed to love each other. Luke commented that it wasn't a very crown prince-like thinking. Yale was indeed going to be the next king, but he was his brother as well, and he didn't want to see his little brother sad. Luke thought his brother was very cool before saying Luludi was already in marriage discussions with the heir of a marquis. Yale stated that would stop if he made Luludi his fiancée since he didn't have one yet. Luke asked if he liked Luludi, and Yale answered that he didn't have any special feelings for her, though he did think she was cute. Then, Yale whispered something to Luke, saying this was just between them. Luke exclaimed in shock after hearing that Yale was in love with their aunt, Karina, and that it was mutual. Karina, their father's youngest sister, was in her early 30s. She was a sword maniac and quite eccentric. She was forcibly married and came back home on the same day after she beat her husband half to death. Aside from their father, Yale thought it would take a few years to get their grandfather's approval. That was why Luludi's marriage could also be held back for a few years. He asked what Luke thought, and Luke sighed, saying he didn't need to do anything since Luludi's feelings were not for him. Yale was surprised and said he'd regret not being very upfront about his feelings. Luke replied that he'd deal with it himself when he did regret it. Iris came after leaving Val's, and the two bid Yale goodbye. While walking, Luke asked Iris what they should do now. Iris responded that they'd buy household items to put in the dormitory, and a short walk would take them to a place where they could find a good store for that. Luke followed Iris as she entered various stores to buy items for the dormitory. As they were grocery shopping, Iris told him not to buy too many perishables because she would only serve him the right amount of food, no matter how much he bought. Luke whispered for her not to call him His Highness, and Iris agreed to address him by his name from now on. After arriving at the dormitory, Luke was panting as he reached his room on the 4th floor. He thought it would be nice to live on the 1st floor. Iris informed him that the 4th floor was restricted to those of ducal rank and above for security reasons. It was also good to have a room upstairs, as it was good for his diet. Luke entered the bathroom and was amazed to find that there was even hot water. Iris explained that it was because there was a magic tool that could control the temperature. Though the magic stones in the core need to be replaced regularly, it doesn't cost much. They also have a cold box where they can store some ingredients, which Luke thought was nice. Iris stored the food they bought in the cold box before serving Luke some tea. Luke thought she must be tired so she could rest in her room. Iris thanked him and told him to ring the bell if he needed anything. Luke lay on the couch and looked at his status. Luke originally had 5 attributes, which were quite outstanding, but because of the goddess' blessing and grace, he could now use all of them. Fairy explained that the soul belonged to him, so he could naturally use all the attributes, as he was from a higher world than this one. He laughed, finding the original Luke's skills stupid. He thought he was like an intermediate ranger, and wondered just how religiously he was peeping. Luke thought for a while, and wondered how best to spend app points. The fairy told him physical strength was necessary since it enhanced everything in his body, including his 5 senses. By reaching level 10, he could no longer be considered human. However, he was asked to limit it to level 5 because sudden physical changes could be hard on the body. He can also evolve his sword skills to become a master swordsman by leveling them up to 10. With that skill, he won't fall behind in the academy. Night came, and Iris served Luke's dinner, hoping it would suit his tastes. Luke excitedly looked at the food and thought everything was delicious. He noticed there was only a plate for him and asked Iris where her meal was. Iris answered that the attendant eats after their master has eaten. Luke thought she couldn't take a break if she ate after him, and Iris replied that the academy had already considered that. They had a 90-minute lunch break, so there was no problem. Luke didn't like inefficiency, so he told her they should eat together when it was just the two of them or when it was just their relatives. Iris thanked him for his consideration and sat at the table to eat with him. Iris informed him that there was no exam tomorrow, so he should visit Amelia. Luke asked if the adopted son-in-law, a prince, needed to go to his fiancée, a duke's daughter. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for her to come instead? Iris apologized and admitted that Amelia should see him, according to etiquette. Luke didn't expect Amelia to come to see her, as she has androphobia, so Iris should just notify her attendant that they have arrived and tell her that he'll see her in class the day after tomorrow, and that there was no need to act formally. Iris was surprised and thought that rumors could be very unreliable. Luke told her he wanted to go to the temple tomorrow and asked if that was okay. Iris replied that it was no problem and that she'd accompany him. However, Luke told her he'd go alone. Iris told him he couldn't because the Duke had ordered her to keep a close eye on him for the time being. If he ran away, she'll take responsibility for it. Luke was frustrated and asked to talk about what they wanted regarding their daily lives. Iris asked if it was a request, and Luke replied that it was, and that he had 3 requests. First, meals should be based on meat and vegetables, not bread and rice. Second, take a bath once a day. Third, exercise in the morning and evening. Iris asked what he wanted to do in the morning, and Fairy informed him that she was asking because she had to get up quite early to prepare breakfast, and of course, she wouldn't let him go alone. Luke hesitatingly answered that he wanted to go for a stroll, and Iris said she'd go with her, but only for 30 minutes starting at 6, and asked him to make it light. Luke was bummed and thought he couldn't level up like that. Iris listed her requests. First, he should do his best to lose weight. Second, he should never eat anything other than the food she provides. Third, he should always report when he wants to leave. Fourth, he should do his best at studying. And fifth, he should teach her every day, even if it was something trivial. After the meal, Luke went to the bathroom to bathe. He was thankful that he had a big bathroom in his room so he could bathe every day. Fairy informed him that usually, in this world, he can't take a bath regularly because the magic stone that was used as the core might be cheap, but the bathtub was a super luxury item. After washing, he changed into his pajamas and told Iris he was done, so she should get in before the water got cold. Iris flinched and rushed inside the bathroom with her towel and clothes. Fairy asked what Luke thought, and Luke wondered what it meant. Fairy explained that Iris was rushing to wash herself because if the rumors were true, he'd definitely peek on her. Luke explained that he wouldn't, but she said she wanted to be his attendant. Fairy explained that the main reason was that she wanted to be his disciple. After Duke Jail recognized her family's expertise in recovery magic, he gave her family a territory. That territory has developed into a town, and her family has been promoted to the count level, but the amount of money spent on developing the territory has made their financial situation difficult. So, her father wants to marry off his daughters to improve their situation. Luke thought the count must have thought he could use marriage for political reasons because they have a holy attribute. Just then, the bathroom door opened, and Iris came out. Luke thought she was fast and told her it would not be an issue if she took a longer bath. Iris refused and thanked him for keeping the water warm. Then, she asked why he didn't peek at her, confusing Luke. Iris wondered if she was not attractive enough, or if she was not his type. She was so nervous that she thought he would peek on her or leave her, and then suddenly make her his mistress. Luke asked Iris if she was romantically interested in him, and said he would never do any of that to someone who wasn't. Back then, people he didn't even peek at made fun of him for being a peeping Tom. But he was just peeking at someone backbiting and insulting him because that was what they would expect him to do. Iris thought he didn't care as long as they were cute, which Luke denied and told Iris not to treat her body so cheaply. Iris exclaimed that her body was not cheap. She's been courted by many men but refused all of them, so it was expensive. Luke apologized and told her she didn't have to worry about being assaulted because he wouldn't think about it unless she consented. Iris exclaimed she had experienced so many surprises today, and her affection for Luke was rising. However, she was not ready to sleep with him yet and asked him to wait a little longer. Luke assured her he wouldn't put his hands on her, but Iris exclaimed she wouldn't like it if she confessed her feelings to him, and he refused to put his hands on her. Luke thought Iris was an annoying woman. Thank you for watching, guys. I hope you loved this manga. Have a good day.